it could be yesterday. I was talking to another rabbi who is a part of the who's a part of the chief rabbinate of Africa, and I was talking to him. He's a Haitian guy, and I was telling him, I was like, we're very clear what Rabbi Pinchas's objectives are in Africa, but like, what his objectives with us in North America? And and he was asking me like, what's the main goal? What's the goal? What's the concept? And I said to him, the goal for us in North America is the idea of rebuilding the Black family, and
Amen.
to be able to look at, the fact that like in many ways, as Black people, we've never really had a family structure that was outside of imitating, our basically our oppressors. So
Mhm.
the concept of a family and a family structure was something that like was very much rooted in, wanting to imitate, white society, which, there's pros and cons to it. But the point is just saying that's a big part of, our experience. So like, what does it mean if we moved away from the Western understanding of a family? What does a family mean in a God concept? God created Adam and Eve. God told Abraham his descendants, will be a blessing. His family will be a blessing to all the other families on planet Earth. So, like, what's going on? Like, what is this idea? What does it mean to have a family? What does it mean to have a God family? Because, when I look at the Western idea of family, I think of two people that have jobs and they work and their kids go to school and their kids are good in school and then people make money and they abide by the laws of the land and they pay taxes and they live and they retire and their kids get married and they perpetuate that system.
Mhm.
And great, I get it. I'm not here to put that down. I'm just saying, what does it mean to have a spiritual family, right? Because the idea by Abraham, the sages teach that Abraham kept all the commandments of the Torah. So how could he keep all the commandments of the Torah and there was no Mount Sinai? There were none of these things, right? So this idea of Abraham keeping the entire Torah is this idea that his soul was elevated to a point where he was able to intellectualize, what was impure and what was pure, what was mundane, what was holy. He was able to do that. Abraham was able to do that. That's why we look up to him. He was able to go around and use, they said, what the human brain is using, like what, 3%, 4% of its ability. So
Mhm.
you can say using more of the human brain is to say that to use more of the human brain is to say that we're able to see what the Torah has prescribed for us with our own eyes. The Torah tells us to stay away from certain things and do certain things and do that. Like, for example, a man's desire is to be with women and be attracted to many different women. It's the way that we're biologically created. Now, the Torah says in order for a man to achieve his potential spiritually, he needs to acquire a wife.
Mhm.
So why would God create a desire in us? He's the one who created this desire for men to like see women and this and to think, about procreation. But then he tells a guy to settle with, you know, to settle with, one woman. What's going on? What's going there? Like we have a desire that we're built with, but then God gives us this Torah, and He subjugates us to that, right? And so, in the dynamic of Abraham, Abraham didn't even need that subjugation. He was clear enough in his reasoning and his logic that he could look around and say, "This is permitted, and this is not permitted. If I do this, this is harmful. If I do this, this is beneficial. I need to stay away from this environment and be in this environment." You know what I mean? He was able to rationalize that, and that's the original spiritual man, right?
Mhm.
That's the original spiritual man that he innately understood what he should stay away from and what he should be closer to. it's like sometimes you could feel like certain foods, you could feel, I feel more healthy after I eat it. I don't need to, what I'm saying? I don't need to read a report. I don't need to read a
Right.
report, that's telling me like, now you ate some healthy food, so now I feel healthy. No, it innately feels better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And other stuff I have to force myself to eat, right? So it's just to say that it's this idea of being able to look at, reality, to be able to look at reality and then to be able to say, you know what, um, I could see this versus that. So this is the frame of Abraham, and this is the idea. Because right now we got to talk about this idea of rebuilding the Black family, and we're going to get into, some very deep ideas. But this is the situation that you guys are in as a family, is to say like, hey, you know what, we got a generation that's coming off of, the crack epidemic. We have a generation coming off of the prison industrial complex. We have a generation that's, coming off of legislation and laws that locked up our youth. Petty crimes were, eventually mechanisms to turn people into felons. And welfare was put into our community to separate to encourage the Black woman to not have a husband, but to have children. There's nothing wrong with personal assistance. That's great. We pay taxes. That's an okay thing. But when you're using it as a mechanism for a woman to not get married and say, I can have children and receive more money, but if I get married, I don't get those same supports, you're crippling people now, right? So we're coming in at this generation right after that, and we're like, okay, so what do we do now? This is what's going on around us. This is what's happening, right? And so, for you guys, this could be a tremendous amount of holiness and even a tremendous amount of wealth. And the reason why is, when we look at like, so this is the mechanism that I'm working with right now. And we're going to go into some Torah learning, some really important stuff, but we're building a basis for mission. And so when you look at it, so like, for example, they did all these statistical reports. And so 26% of African Americans identify as descendants of Israelites, right? 26%. 9% of them actually have what they would define as Hebrewic practices. I don't know what they meant by that. I don't know if it's like One West guys or Rabbi Fournier guys or whatever. I don't know what the situation is, but the point is the point is to say that the point is to say that that's what they're going by, right? So 26%. So every year, the African American community has $1.9 trillion in buying power. Okay, $1.9 trillion in buying power. If we were a country unto ourselves, we would be the 16th largest economy in the world. So we have $1.9 trillion in buying power. 26% of those people identify as Israelites. 26% of that 1.9 trillion is close to $500 billion, $500 billion, right? And so this idea of $500 billion, within that $500 billion, 12% of that money is spent on food, and 4% of that is given to content, right? So that combined number is around $70 billion a year, right? And that $70 billion is a combination of the $70 billion is a combination of food and also entertainment, right? So what we're saying is saying that, okay, so our movement in essence, right? The ideas that we're pushing, the movement in essence is our movement in essence is basically reconnecting people, African Americans, to a way that one edifies them by connecting to the tribes of Israel, which is a huge edification coming from America. And second point is that we are giving for the first time African Americans to pray to God in their own voice, right? The AME church was a byproduct of not being allowed in Protestant churches and having to have our own Black environments, right? So we were learning by them. We were learning what they said and how they praised, and we imitated it and add our swag to it, whatever you want to call it, right? You know, and then Islam came along, right? And Islam came along, and all these things for me, they were all building blocks of positivity. You know what I mean? They're all building blocks of positivity, and during those times, those generations, they were needed, and anything other than that would not have been helpful because it would not have dealt with the core condition of those people. So this is bad, that was bad, and this is good. That's not the conversation. We're just talking about progressional steps of healing, right? And so now where we're at is saying like, okay, the black thing was the black Muslim movement was great. Why? Because it allowed the African American to identify himself as an individual, right? The AME Church was very much about like organization, about community order, about tithing, and all these different dynamics that exist in politics, and all these things were a byproduct of that. The Black Muslim movement, you could say, was very much about the specifically with the black man, like really giving him a certain sense of autonomy, right? Where it was like he was autonomous to God, and he um, was disciplined in that way, and he really rejected a lot of the idiosyncrasies, a lot of the details that was perpetuated by the secular system that were very damaging for black men, right? So they dealt with the individual very well, right? So now what we're bringing to the table is this idea of saying like, you know what? All those movements were great and part of our progressional level, but now we have to talk to God in our own voice. And we have to express our own traditions based off of the social condition that we're in. We have to present that to our community, right? And so that's why the Igbo and the other West African tribes, the West African tribes that are Israelites are so important because we can extrapolate certain traditions that come from there. We're still American, right? This isn't Pan African. This is like we don't need to be wearing the dashikis and all those outfits and all that type of stuff. I mean, it was nice. I get it. It didn't work either. But the point is just saying like I get it, but there are certain cultural things that come along that we need to bring into our community, like ideas of womanhood, right? Women dealing with their changes as they develop, men character in terms of fortitude, in terms of ethics, in terms of morals, in in family, marriage, community, roles, dynamics. How do these things look? How do we deal with these things? Because if we're going to rebuild the black community, we can't rebuild it off of the system that failed us. Like we can't go back and say, hey, how y'all doing it in the white communities? Like we can't do that. We have to have a hybrid between our African American experience and spiritual traditions that come from our ancestors in the west of Africa, going all the way back to Israel. And so that's what we're up against, right? And so like you guys as a couple, a lot of the the mechanism of healing for our people is coming through the union of family, right? And dealing with those issues and being able to talk to people and say, hey, you know what? This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I've dealt with in marriage. This is how I dealt with certain, challenges. This is what I dealt with in terms of with my husband. This is what I dealt with in terms of my wife. This is what I had to build. This is how I had to overcome. I had this perception about life, and then it had to change because of marriage in order for it to be successful. These are the things that are going to help our people and heal our people, is to be able to talk about marriage from a spiritual sense, right? So one of the things I want to connect you guys with, and we'll talk about it more, I'm going to talk to her more, but if you've been following the conversation with Will X Zion, I had a conversation with a lady, we brought on the group from the Amunina Defenders, right? And it was a lady named Simone there who is very much knowledgeable and a student of the Amunina traditions practiced by the Igbos. And and just in general, she's a part of that whole Nigerian dynamic. She's African American. I think she's actually Haitian or something like this. Anyway, she was on there, but I want to figure out a way at the right time to bring you guys together, because the way I think you guys should be looking towards the future is saying like, hey, your niche in this whole conversation is saying, hey, we want to show people how to be couples and how to be families. And then from here we will be able to learn different traditions and different techniques from the west of Africa. We'll learn modern day Jewish practices, and then we'll take our own experiences as a couple and mesh them together, and then be able to really connect, you know, other people. And then from there, that opens a world of publishing for you guys. Meaning, what does it mean to create peace in the home? What does it mean to raise children? You guys have 10 children, you know what I mean? So you have had a lot of experience, you know what I mean? So you got a lot of data, right? And so
Yeah, we have 12.
12,
12, yeah.
there you go. 12 signs of the zodiac, right? So you got that. And anyways, because the point is just saying that that's the vision, right? Because for me, I'm not working with students, I'm working with teachers, right? You guys got students. You know what I'm saying? We gotta make this thing, we gotta get this thing big. We gotta figure out how to reach millions of people on this. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a joke. You know what I mean? Like, this is a real thing. So, this is the dynamic of you guys think about it. It's like, hey, you know what? We have to be an example for other couples of our community to have a roadmap. You know, in a young guy, he gets a girl pregnant, and he's just like, hey, you know what do I do, right? So now we're building a dynamic where we have infrastructure that this guy who says he's woke, he says, I know who I am, I'm an Israelite. All right, cool, you Israelite. So now you got to be a Israelite father, you know, and you got to be an Israelite husband, right? Because it doesn't just stop. It's not we're not gang banging it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lifestyle. You know what I mean? And so anyway, so yeah, so we need examples, we need teachers, and I believe that the reason why God linked us together, is because you guys could really be a huge point of inspiration for the world, but specifically starting with our people, and being able to integrate these spiritual ideas into your life and your family. So I'll say like this: so the main thing to start with is the woman and the man have to learn Torah together. It has to be a part of their experience. I'm sure you guys do. You guys already made this far, so I'm sure you guys do learn together. But learning like partnership learning. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, guys, even me, I'm married. You want to give over, you want your wife to receive it 100%. But it's also that dialogue, right? So it's more learning together. There are times where we speak and we give over as men. You know what I mean? At the Shabbat table, different times, 100%. But then there's an intimate time where we hear each other's perspectives, right? So with that being said, the idea of this system of learning, right? And this is something that I learned, in the yeshiva system here, and it's something that creates a tremendous amount of shalom between couples. When couples are able to speak words of Torah with each other, like for example, when you wake up in the morning, many of our big humongous sages waking up in the morning, a man and a woman recite the 18 blessings, right? And each of the blessings, at the end of them, they should listen to each other's blessings and recite Amen, right? So when the husband's making his blessings in the morning, the wife's listening to each of the blessings. Boom, she says, I'm saying the blessings in the morning blessings, right in the Siddur. And the husband, he listens to his wife makes brachot, and he answers Amen too, right? And so and so and so that's the beginning of their day, right? They get up in the morning, they go, they say ani modi ani, sorry, and they go to the bathroom and they come out of the bathroom and they wash their hands and then they say netilat yadayim, and the husband goes to the bathroom, whoever goes first, whatever, and they come out and then they say the blessings together, right? Because like the whole purpose of the context of the Israelite Jewish marriage, right, is the bringing of two souls and bringing them together, right? That's the basic thing. We're bringing two souls are coming together, and the way that the soul is manifested through devotion to God, right? So we're basically here to serve God. Basically, we want to be closer to God, but God created this mechanism called relationships, right? And in this case, marriage, right? And he creates that mechanism so we can share unconditionally, hopefully get to a point where we can share unconditionally so we could become closer to God. Like the secular world says, no, it's about you're in love with each other and you care so much and there's romance and this and that and that. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but only in the context that we both are just together to become closer to God. And we said, hey, we can't achieve this closeness on our own. And we can't just do it with vicarious people. We have to do it in the union. And so we do this and we work together and we share together and we do these things together. And we do these things together, and through these efforts together, I as an individual and you as an individual become closer to the source, which brings us more fulfillment. And that fulfillment that we receive, we share it together, right? It's like it's two people who are becoming closer. So the whole thing about marriage has nothing to do with being in love and these things. Yes, love is an expression of experiencing of light, right? You experience light with this person, but the levels of light, we have no idea. We can't even imagine when we hear about Sarah and Abraham and Isaac and Rebecca and these Jacob and Leah, Rachel, all these different things. We can't imagine the level of connection that they had between each other. We're dealing in 2024 type stuff. So the thing is like this. So the key in what we have to teach, especially the young people, is that the basis of a healthy relationship is being able to learn and understand each other's Torah, right? To learn and understand each other's Torah. And because the male has a Torah that's unique from the masculine perspective, and the woman has a unique Torah from the feminine perspective. And we have to be able to learn with each other to hear perspective, right? And build from there, right? The man is the source of light, right? He's the channel of light. The man brings in the light into the home, right? That's what he does. That's his job, right? And he brings that light and he shares it with his wife, and his wife manifests that light, right? So to make that connection stronger, they have to build multiple levels of intimacy, right? And one of the main levels and one of the biggest levels is study, is being able to study, is to be able to be in the same consciousness, to have different study projects together. Like you see, like your husband, he'd be looking at all those videos I'd be putting up, right? And the thing is that in that same way that we find a particular safer and we learn it together. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the thing. Like, that like we learning together is the hugest thing, because you get to learn and appreciate in a different way, right? So with that being said, a lot of times this open up the world of learning, right? And we're going to spend a little bit of time, maybe the next few classes, conversations we have is going to be very much in this area, because this is the element, this is the hook, right? This is, you guys are like, hey, you know what, we want to show couples how to live a holy life together, right? Forget about the secular a dog, a cat, a 2-car garage, a nuclear house. That's them. That's Asaph. That's what Asaph, that's his dream life. right? The 2-car garage, the white picket fence, that's him. That ain't got nothing to do with me, bro. I'm Jacob, bro. Like I'm not on that. That does not do it for my soul. I'm sorry. Like we just black people, we make a little money, we start turning into kings. You know what I mean? We're like, I don't know, man. I'm dressing different. I don't understand y'all. But the point is just saying that we're on a spiritual aspect, right? You know, you have Asaph, and he's a physical guy, and he wants a white picket fence and a 2-car garage and a dog and a cat and a boy and a girl and a microwave and a TV, and he works and he comes home and has a shot of whiskey, and that's enough for him. That's enough for him. That's where his soul is at, bro. As black men, we may need to come. We may need to just study for 3 hours. You know what I'm saying? We don't know that our women may just have to sing it out. They may have to beg. We're not built like them, and we've been trying to put ourselves in these small spiritual vices, and it doesn't work. It's like we can't do ourselves in that. So, with that being said, let's open up the door of studying, and let's understand studying in a new way. Because normally, when Gentiles read the Torah, they read it and they read our commentaries and they read, the Talmud, and they hear all these different rabbis with different perspectives. And they're like, God, the Jews are always arguing with each other. This rabbi says this and this rabbi said, and forget about this. Let's not just put the Gentiles into it. Even a lot of our Jews, they think this way, right? They're like, oh yeah, one rabbi says like this and one rabbi says that, and they'll criticize. What do you know? Who knows? Why should we even care? Blah, 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 blah. This whole thing, right? But the thing is like this. So Yaakov had 4 wives, and the main two, right? Because the other twos were like kind of like assistants for them. They did that back in the day, right? Where one woman would have like a handmaid who worked with her and was there with her for everything, right? And in these cases, the women at different times gave her husband said, I want you to have more kids, and I want you to give by my handmaid. This type of thing, right? Like our best friend, I don't know, however way you want to explain it, it was thousands of years ago, right? It's not now, right? But the point is saying this is how they did things. And so out of that came different people and different personalities, to the point that the Torah says that there were 12 tribes. Now, when you sit back and you think about that idea of 12 tribes, well, you know what? 12 tribes, what we're saying here? If I have 100 kids, if I have 100 kids, people are going to say that's the tribe of Rabbi Mordecai. That's his tribe. He got 100 kids. He went in. He had wives. The whole thing's like King Solomon. He's one of these guys, right? But how could you have 12 different tribes come from your lineage? Right? That means these individuals are all distinct to themselves. Not like they come from one tribe. No, there were 12 different tribes. Right? And it's all connected to Abraham, and we could go into it, when it says, this thing about Abraham and Yitzhak being his son. I mean, it says it twice. We can learn out that, I think I learned it with you guys. We learned about Shem Tov, and he talks about this idea of, you know, Abraham represented this level of Hesed, and Yitzhak represented this level of Gevurah. So how could somebody of Hesed give over a child of Gevurah? Because within Hesed was also Gevurah, and all these other different Tiferet and all these other energies that were manifest through the lineage, right? And we'll go more into what I'm saying on this point. But what I'm saying is saying that we have to understand that all the 12 tribes are all distinct to themselves. That's why the book of Shoftim says that all the tribes had their own territory and they did as they wanted. They were not centralized. They didn't have anything until they asked Shmuel for a king later. But the point is, we're talking about 12 different tribes. So that means that there's 12 different perspectives of how to connect to Yaakov and how to connect to Hashem, right? And so we're going to deal with two other perspectives, and we're going to start with Genesis 19:29-17. As you see in front of it, and it says, Leah had weak eyes, and Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Now, the question is by this, right? The question is by this, what is meant? What is meant by this? What is meant that the Torah is talking about the physical description of women? Like that's where the Torah is at, right? Right? And so we're trying to make sense of that. Like, what is the Torah superficial? Like one girl's were weak eyes, and then another girl was shapely and beautiful. So we're doing that. The Torah, creation of God, is explaining to us that the two main sisters in the story of the 12 tribes of Israel, which is the basis of creation. Creation was created for Israel. The whole purpose of planet Earth, everything was for the Israel to perform the precepts of the Torah. So how could the Torah start this conversation about the description of Leah and Rachel from the standpoint of one being weak, having weak eyes, or tender eyes, right? In Rachot, right? And one having tender eyes, right? So how do we understand that, right? How do we understand that? Because this is a huge concept. Like, what's going on? Is this superficial? Is this Vogue magazine? What's going on? So I'm not going to go into the point like this because I could do it. I mean, I could read this the right inside, but I want to say it outside to you. So the thing is like this: the Rabbanim bring down that when the Torah speaks about Leah having weak eyes, it's not talking about weak eyes. It's saying that she cried a lot, right? And so the normal perspective that the Midrashi bring is that she cried a lot because people said she was going to marry Esau. And so she was sad that she was going to marry Esau. That's level A. But the sages dig deeper into it, and they understand it to mean that no, in fact, Leah's eyes, not that they were weak, but rather she cried because people said she would be good for Esau, right? Because you got to remember, this is Lavan, right? Rachel's brothers, kids, right? They're in the same, house of Shem, right? So it would be natural for them to maybe be set up with each other. So people said Leah, because of her personality and her emotional state, that she would be good for Aesop, and so therefore she was sad. But really, they say even more, her emotions were a little bit unstable, right? Meaning that like she was a very emotional person in general, as where her sister was shapely and beautiful. So are they talking about her size, like her physical appearance, or are they talking about her conduct? Like Leah, Rachel was like the perfect girl. She woke up on time. She did everything her parents wanted. She didn't ask questions. She was organized. This was Rachel. Leah was like more emotional. Maybe you could say even emotional wreck, right? And so she was different, right? And so this is important to understand because now if we understand the personalities of Leah, and Leah was sometimes she was on and sometimes she was off, and we understand the personality of Rachel, who was always on, right? And they were different in that way, right? And they were sisters, right? And they loved each other. But this is the dynamic. Why is this important? Because when you look at the descendants of Leah, and like Yehuda, Reuven, right? And you look at the descendants of Rachel, like Yosef and Binyamin, you will see the differences in the personalities of mothers being expressed through the children, right? This children of Leah, right, were more people who were people who would fall off and come back, right? People like Yehuda, right? Yehuda made the mistake with Tamara. Yehuda eventually later had his progenitors were David, and David made mistakes, right? You have Reuven, who was another one of Leah's descendants, who also made mistakes, right? And you had Shimon and Levi, right? And they were kind of aggressive type guys, right? And so you have them, and then on the other side you have Rachel, who had Yosef, who didn't believe in any sin whatsoever, right? He didn't believe in any sin whatsoever. He was totally straight, right? And so and so I'm gonna try to move it to this parsha to make this point. Hold on, wait, is it not make cats? What am I doing? Hold on, hold 1 second. I'm trying to bring the parsha. Yeah, I think it's here. When Yosef is fighting with his brothers, right? Because we're about to open up a whole new. We're about to open up a whole new, level of um. Oh wow, so that's later. We're going to bring a whole new level into this because what we're going to understand ultimately is that when you hear discussions in the Gemara or you hear discussions amongst the commentaries, you're not listening to you're not listening to people fighting with each other, right? What you're listening to is different people who had different perspectives of the Torah because they come from different energy influences. You know what I'm saying? Like this is what we're learning out, right? We're learning out that like when you hear about this group and this rabbi arguing, you got to look at what tribes they come from. Many of them. I mean, some you can, some you cannot. I get it, but the point is just to say that the point is just to say that when we hear the discussions, we're all hearing different discussions from different perspectives, and these different perspectives are coming from the same source. So the challenge in Torah study is not for one to be smarter than the other, or one to conquer the other, or one to prove to the other, but rather through this discussion, we can understand what branch that this person is coming from and find out where we all come from the same trunk and the same root, right? And so that is the challenge. That is the challenge with Torah study, right? Because if we look at Torah study from the standpoint of the secular world, you go on these apps, you hear to see the Hebrew Israelites, they just want to conquer everybody. They want to prove that they know more than you, and and they know more than you do, and from that place, they should be held at a certain esteem, right? And that's not the reality, right? That's not the reality, right? And so anyway, so the point is the same. So this is the point. So there's a famous argument inside of the Torah between Yosef and his brothers, right? The Torah says that Yosef used to give bad reports on his brothers, right? And so that's the part I'm trying to find right now, and I'm a little struggling a little bit. But I'm going to bring this parsha because this parsha is basically, it shows this distinction, and when we understand this distinction, we'll understand that there's no such thing as superior knowledge in Torah, but there's only just different perspectives, right? And that's it. That's the whole thing. There's no higher down. There's God and there's us, right? Now we had situations where Moses was leading us, and we have different rabbis, in different generations who lead us, meaning they create the environment for us to express our true self, right? If someone is imposing something on you to limit your progression and your expression, that's not holy, right? And so what we're saying is, hold on, I'm just gonna, I don't know why. Okay, great. All right, so we're getting closer. Oh my goodness, I don't know what this is. Hold on. Like show Yaakov settled in Canaan. Okay, perfect. Now we're here. Okay. So he settled in Canaan, and he says, at this time Jacob, and he was 17, was Jacob at this time, if Jacob at 17-year-old Joseph tended to the flocks, his brothers, blah 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 blah, and he gave bad reports about them. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is the big point, and this is a huge point when you want to teach an entry into biblical literature, right? This is a huge point. Okay, so Rashi says, hold on, let me see. What happened? Hold on. Striking. Okay. Came up satisfied. Hold on. I'm looking for some key points, but I think this I passed it already. I just want to see the other one. Okay. Okay. So this is the thing right here. So it says like this. So it says, so he says he gave bad reports. Ko ra'ah shehaya ro'eh va'achav b'nei le'ada haya megid le'aviz. So aviv. So he says, whomever saw whatever he saw wrong in his brothers of the sons of Leah. He reported to his father that they refused to cut off the flesh from the living animals, and and he says that they used to cut off flesh of the living animals, which we know is one of the big prohibitions. You can't eat a live animal. They treated the sons of the handmaids with contempt. They were mean to the other ones, like we're the main kids of Yaakov, calling them slaves, and they were suspected of living in an immoral manner. With these three similar manners, he was therefore punished. In consequence of having stated that they ate flesh from the living animals, the scripture says that they slew a he goat after, and they sold him, and they did not eat its flesh while the animals were still living. And it's because of the slander of which related to them, they called the brothers slaves. Yosef was sold for a slave. Anyways, so they're comparing these points, right? And so the point is like this. It's not that, so either it's two things. Either the brothers were wicked and Joseph's reporting on them, or they have different perspective of understanding the Torah. And so the way that Yosef and his lineage understood the Torah, it was by the letter of the law. There was no differentiations. As were the sons of Leah, because of Leah's personality, it were kind of like, Hebrew, they say chetzi chetzi. It's like, it's like half and half. Sometimes they see the righteous side, sometimes they succumb to their evil inclination, back and back. And you'll see that with Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda would sin with Tamar, but he came back and made tshuva. Or you'll see with Yosef. Yosef was trying to be seduced by Potiphar's wife. He completely rejected it, right? He was totally straight, right? And so you will see that they are both are different. They're both from the same stock, but they have different perspectives based off of the energies of their mothers, right? And so why is this important? Because when we go into Torah discourse, we can't look at Torah discourse from the standpoint of, okay, this guy's right and this guy's wrong, or I agree with this person and I don't agree with that person, or the rabbis just, they can't figure it out, they're always debating with each other, blah, 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 blah. No, but rather understanding that there's different perspectives. And even on Mount Sinai, right? Even on Mount Sinai, there is, everyone stood at different parts on Mount Sinai. Some people stood to the left, some people in the front, some people in the back, and they saw God, right? They saw God. They saw the blast. They saw the voices. They saw everything, right? But everyone was standing in different places. So the idea is to say that, like, when we understand this whole dynamic, this whole system, that we have to say, hey, you know what? That, we have to learn it from the standpoint of being able to say, hey, you know what? This is the way that I see it. And this is the way that I understand it. So this is the way that we can have that discourse in a proper way. Because, the Christians, they just come up with whatever they want. They'd be like, hey, God came to me this morning and I feel it. So one of the things I was taught when I was in the learning, in the way that the tradition continues on, is that, like, right, as King Shlomo would say, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So whatever idea we come up with, it's already been talked about and written about, right? And the reason why God puts the idea in our head is because he wants us to go out and find that source. So what I would learn when I was in yeshiva is, like, it's okay to read the Torah and say, I see it in this way. I see it in this way. But your job from that point on is to look through the traditions and to look through different sources and different commentaries on the same point to be able to prove or to substantiate your position. And this is the beginning of Torah logic. So it's good to say, like, okay, I read it and I hear this. Okay, very nice. But what's the tradition? So on this first verse, to say Veyatse, Yaakov mi bar Beersheba, right? So Yaakov goes to Beersheba, and it says Allah Haran, and it says and he set out for Haran, right? And I talked about this. If you've heard my other classes, you heard me talk on this because this is a big topic this week. But I want to go into this point. So we have Rashi, right? So I want us to like try to figure out this whole idea of like what is Rashi? What is Rashi about? Why does everyone talk about Rashi? What's so great about Rashi? What is this? Is this the European rabbis, assorting authority? Like what's going on? Explain it to me, please. So one of the reasons why the Torah world loves Rashi is because Rashi has this ability. Rashi's goal, he writes that his goal is to teach or explain the basic pashat of the verse. Now, to understand what he means by pashat, we have to go into this idea of pardes. We may have mentioned it before, but we'll go over it again. So pardes is the system that the rabbis have used for thousands of years to analyze the Torah. This is where they come up with the commentaries. This is how they've deduced laws. It's from this system. It's called Pardes. So Pardes is P-R-D P-R-D-S. Yeah. Peshat, Rimis, Drash, and Sod. So Peshat means the literal interpretation, like what the verse says literally. Rimis, right, which is the R, is this dynamic. Rimis means hints, like meaning that it's written in a way that is giving a hint to a greater idea. That the idea is not limited to just the literal interpretation. That there's more of an understanding there. And then you have this level of drash, which is the D, and the drash is a dynamic where there's a system called the 13 Principles of Rabbi Ishmael, right? You can look it up. 13 Principles of Rabbi Ishmael, however way you spell it. And those 13 principles is what the sages use in a great assembly to look into the text and to be able to see extra words, extra letters, repetitions in certain areas. And from there, they were able to see that God was communicating a greater meaning. It wasn't just the fact that God said that, Abraham, that had a son named Isaac, and Abraham beget Isaac. It's not like they're saying it like back to back, right? They're not just saying it for no reason. Nothing in the Torah is for no reason. God is communicating to us on many different levels. It's a spiritual technology, right? And so when we're analyzing the Torah, we have to understand that it's written in codes. That yes, there's the literal interpretation. There's the pashat, right? And that's where most of the Gentiles stay at, right? And maybe they'll try to come up with a meaning or like a point of frame that makes them feel good or makes a sense to them. But we understand that the world is controlled and influenced by the ego. So for us, yes, I can come up with my own ideas. Of course, I'm supposed to think. I'm supposed to think critically. That's what they've done in every generation. But that's a byproduct of learning the traditions of the people who came before me, right? That's the whole point, right? The whole point is to learn from the people who came before me and to take all that data and accumulate it and have a basis of me having an understanding that I have on my own. But it only comes from accumulating that data. It's not just from me just speaking on my ego. I don't want my ego. I want the purest part of my intellect. And so the way that I purify my intellect is by being a part of a tradition of learning, right? And it's not my own thing. It's something that there's a school of learning. There's a system of learning. There's traditions. There's techniques. And I'm looking through those different historical experiences and I'm applying it to my intellect today. So you can see on this first verse, there's on this thing. This is the Sefaria, right? They have over 123 commentaries, right? a lot of them in Hebrew. So if you read Hebrew, you do it. A lot of them are English, or some of them are English, right? But the bottom line is saying that if I want to have a clarity on what's being said, I don't want to just, open my mouth and just say, "Oh, I read this and this is what I feel. The Lord had put a spirit inside of me, and this is what I." No, I want to be a part of a tradition because if I'm saying I'm Israel, these are my ancestors. And these are my ancestors spread all across the world. If you do these DNA tests, you could see that you have an ancestor in this part of the world. You never knew. You guys got the same DNA, whatever, blah, blah, blah. In this case, it's a source of holiness. And we're saying that, no, you know what? That I have ancestors that are all around the world that have existed throughout history, and they all were dedicated to Torah. Some of them were Spanish, some of them were European, some of them were African, some of them were different frames of Africa, some were from different parts of Europe, some were from people from India, some people were from Asia, but we all share a similar DNA line, and we all love the Torah. So I want to be able to learn from all of those people. All those people are connected to me in DNA and also in spirit, right? And so I want to learn those commentaries. I want to see the different perspectives of that. So for example, so this is one way of learning. So Jacob went out, right? Veyatse Yaakov. What does that mean? It's owning the fact. This is what Rashi says, right? This is what Rashi says. This is Rashi's perspective. It's just one perspective. So he says, Jacob went out, owning the fact that it is because the daughters of Canaan were evil, in the evil of Isaac and their father Jacob. Esau went to Ishmael, scripture, and broke off the narrative contained in the section dealing with Jacob and wrote to verse 6 and to verse 6 till 9. Now Jacob saw Isaac and he blessed. That was the daughters of Canaan were evil in the eyes of Isaac, and so went Ishmael, and and he finished this account, and Esau further married them. It reads so he's bringing a midrash. He's in essence right now. When you read a commentary, you have to ask a question because these people are not prophets. Okay, these are Torah scholars, right? That have divine inspiration, but they're not prophets. So we learn them to understand from an intellectual standpoint. What is Rashi talking about? Where is he coming from? Right? So more than likely, Rashi is commenting on a midrash. So now you understand the process of the midrash, right? Because some people read the midrash and they think the midrash is a history book, is giving an alternative explanation of the Torah. No, the midrash, drash, right? Peshat, Remes, drash. There's a whole study called the midrashim, right? The midrashim are basically the rabbis looked into the text and they saw different patterns and different consistencies and inconsistencies, and they expounded on them, right? So we're supposed to understand what did they see inside of the verse. Not that we're worshiping it and we're saying, "Oh yeah, this is what God says." No, it's not about that. It's about this idea. Hold on one second. It's about okay. So it's about the idea of it's about the idea of being able to look at the pasukim, the verses. And let me go back to the screen to be able to go into the pasukim, the verses, and to be able to see that in every verse there is a whole length of discussion, right? And so this discussion that the sages are having here, so I'm assuming Rashi is going off of a midrash because he often brings midrashim, which you got to understand who are the generation of the midrashim, what are they bringing, right? So this is one of my personal Da'ad Zekikin, and so basically it's a lot of Rashi's grandkids, right? So they also write about this idea of Yaakov departing. Yaakov is described as if he is totally alone, leaving his father's house, although no doubt that he had taken along a dowry for his future wife, the same way Eliezer did for Rebecca. The Torah avoided mentioning this as he was fleeing from the hatred of his brother and did not wish to make a public departure public. I have reconstructed the commentary as the way as it stands. The author is claiming that this paragraph had not been written separately from the previous one. Previous one does not make sense. None of the versions of the Chumash is it, none of the versions of the Chumash is not written in the normal manner, leaving space for several words before and after the paragraph. So, anyways, like I said, I could spend all day just going in on that point, but I'm showing you that there's all these different perspectives that when we really sit back and reflect on these perspectives and what's being said, the Or Chaim, another one of my favorite commentators, same point. He talks about the same idea, Veyetze Yaakov. Look at all these people talking about the same thing throughout history for thousands of years, debating, contemplating. So what does the Or Chaim say? The reason the Torah does not consist itself of reporting Yaakov setting out for Pa'adam Amram in verse chapter 28, verse 5, he says it repeats his departure in this point to allude to the encounter he had on the way. This, of course, raises question why the Torah first reported Jacob as already on the way to Pardan Aram. This is especially curious in view of the encounter of Jacob had on his own way encountering before he came close to Haran. Why did the Torah report these events in the chronological invert manner? So he's asking the question, why does the verse have to be this way? Why can it say that in the beginning he left for Beersheba and he set out for Haran? So why is it to say he set out for Haran, he left for Beersheba? Why is he going backwards? So these are the types of thoughts that come from reading these commentaries. Besides, why did the Torah speak about Haran? Harnan instead of about Jacob being on the way to Haran. While it's true, we learn from Bereshit Rabbah, that's the Midrashim in chapter 68, verse 8. Any word that requires a letter lamed is a prefix. May instead have the letter hey as a suffix. The Torah surely does not employ these various whatever. So the point is just saying he's going in on that, right? And he keeps talking about it. The Torah intended to relate all the happenings of Jacob. At this time, he left home. The Torah reports that initially all the Torah did was all the Torah reports is initially all Jacob did was depart. This did not involve any traveling on his part. The person who walked Velech was someone who was called Harana. This Harana set out from this home to welcome Jacob. So anyways, they're going into this verse, and my point in this point with you is to be able to look at these commentaries and to be able to look. And if we were having more time, right, because we have limited time, we could go more into these verses and say, what does Rashi say that's different than Ibn Ben Ezra? Because he's talking about the same thing too. Right? No, he's talking about the latter here. But the point is just saying this because I moved the verse this way. So we could look at Ibn Ben Ezra on the same verse, and he's like he brings the generation of Sayyidad Gaon, the opinion of he says he went towards Hebron. It could be interpreted as go to Hebron. However, it is not whatever. So all these things, all these opinions, most of them I've been reading them all week. Okay. I've been reading them all week. I've been getting classes on them all week, different people, different parts of the world, the whole thing. And you know what I came to conclusion on? And this is the point. After you learn it, after you learn the tradition, God blesses you with your own unique word, right? Your own unique Devar Torah, your own unique Chiddush, as we say in the Torah world. It's a Chiddush. It's a Chidush. It's a new idea that you came down with. And every person, every Jew, every Israelite has the same thing. So when it says Veyatze Yaakov, mi Beersheba. So now let's understand Haran. Where was Haran? Where was this at before? Where was this idea of Haran? When did we ever hear this? Is this the first time we heard this? No, it's not the first time we heard this. Where do we hear about this? So Abraham and his father, Terach, and his wife and their community, they left Ur Kasdim, and where did they go? They wanted to go to the heirs Canaan, that we know as 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 Eretz Israel, where I'm at right now. This is Eretz Canaan, right? But in between that, they stopped and they settled in Haran, right? You remember that? They stopped there. And that's where God told Abraham, Lech Lecha. That's where the whole thing starts. It starts there when his family says, "Hey, we went as far as we can," and Abraham has to go further by himself, just him and his wife. It was from this place Haran, and then from Haran, then what happened? He went to Eretz Israel, and there was a famine, and then he went into Egypt. His wife was kidnapped, and then he gets his wife back, and he gets all these riches, right? And when he left Egypt, what does it say? He went up from Mitzrayim and he went to the Negev. What is the Negev? The Negev is the desert, right? Where is the desert? That's where Beersheba is. I've been there, right? I was there for weeks. I spent weeks there, Shabbat, in this area of Beersheba. It's in the south of Israel. The Negev means south. The people interpret it as desert, right? This is the south of Israel. So what you're looking at here is that, yes, if you look at it as Jacob, it doesn't make sense why it's in this order. But if you look at it as that Jacob is following in the footsteps of Abraham, then it makes total sense. He was going from the place of Lech Lecha, leaving from the place of plenty. Right? And that's the same cycle that we are doing today. We're going to the place of new beginnings, where God tells us, Lech Lecha. We're already in America, right? What are we worried about God? Why not just make money and eat food and live life every day? Why are we worried about all this spirituality? We're in a place of plenty. We're in Beersheba. Yitzhak was a multi-billionaire.
So, excuse me, Rabbi, Chief Rabbi. So what you're saying here is that Jacob is basically that Hashem is taking Jacob and bringing him the same way that he brought Abraham, and in the same manner, he's doing the same thing to us. He's bringing us back to the same place, and so it's a cycle. It's like it's a path.
That's the point. That's the point. And so understanding that point is going further in this adventure of rediscovery, right? That you're going through this process of you're in Beersheba, but you want to get to the place of Lech Lecha. You're in the place of plenty, you're in America, but you want to go back and you want to go to that place where God first gave you that inspiration to follow truth. And you want to go to that next level, right? And so it's the same cycles that are going over and over and over and over and over again. But the key to this whole consciousness is to be able to, the key thing to this consciousness is to be able to understand that we're living in a spiritual pattern. And so now when we talk about being awakened and being reminded of who we are, we're speaking from the context of coming back to the original cycle. So I'm going to go, I got to pray before it gets too late because the sun's going down here. But we'll continue on next week. And then we're going to start a leadership class just for men. It's not going to be like, it's purely on my side. It's not, it's no requirement to give, any tzedakah or anything, whatever you want to do, you could do. There's no requirement. But we're going to have a class, and I'm starting with you and Otinel, who's he's in, I think you guys are in Houston, he's in Dallas. But anyways, the point is we're building slowly but fast, right? And we're building leaders because you guys, should have, 300-400 people underneath you, this time next year, right? And so we're moving fast, and we're going to have to figure it out. We're going to figure out how to start having Shabbat meals, figuring out how to get sponsors to help come and support, to help out for the expenses on that, being able to do more classes for us to have leadership classes, and you guys have your classes, and you guys are teaching students. You know what I mean? These types of things. So that's the mindset. That's what we're moving on. and we're going to continue on. So next week we'll continue on this process of studying together as a couple, right? And building off of that, because that studying together as a couple, it allows women to understand masculinity, and it allows a man to understand femininity, right? In a holy way. And it brings them closer together. And then that's the basis. The basis is the union between husband and wife through Adam and Chava, expressed in 2024. And in that mechanism is what you ultimately are going to be able to do a lot of good things, but really, bless, your communities by really having couples classes, and to be able to take your real experiences dealing with all types of stuff, losing, you guys lost children, you birthed children, been married all these years, living, just with the different challenges you guys have emotionally, financially, all types of stuff. I mean, I have parents married 50 years, so I get it, like it's a whole thing. So, so anyway, so the point is just saying, so this is to continue on that, and that will be really the focus of our learning, and also dealing with children, teenagers, and this and the growth and how to deal with this spiritually, and really bringing that. And then also I want to bring in Simona into some of these classes so she could speak about some of the traditions of the Igbo people, and how they deal with things. Anyways, I want to pray for that it goes out, but we at same time next week.
Yes,
Baruch
yes.
atah Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen. So you wanted to say something?
It's open, I think, huh?
Yeah, I got it, Kiri.
I think it's open, huh?
What is saying?
I said it's open. Your mic is open. And you want to say something, Shalom?
Oh, shalom. Amen.
I'm with you. I'm listening. Go ahead. I'm just in the dark. I got to turn on my lights to pray in a minute.
Oh, no, I was just saying shalom. Like,
Okay, okay. He's giving the blessing.
Shalom.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. But the key thing is leadership classes, and building off of that. And it's important to start with the men, and then we'll figure out how to work with the couples, right? But the main thing, because I have another student also who's in Dallas. He's also geez, I gotta pray. Anyways, but he's also married as well. So there's going to be like a female male thing, but we're just going to start the key. But the key thing is learning together, and learning how to properly learn together. And a lot of it has to do with researching and learning different perspectives, because it removes the ego out of the learning, and it humbles us to like people who are much greater than us and higher than us. And so it allows us to talk like, okay, this is what so and so says, and it's the way I understand it. And then another person says, okay, well, this is the way I understand it. No one's right or wrong. It's just perspective, right? And that's why you can hear people going back and forth and this, blah, blah, blah. But it's that, and it's also important for the kids to see that too as well. The parents learning together and talking about Torah together. And this verse says this, and the weekly portion says this, and this is the aliyah for the day, and this reminds me of this story, and connecting and these types of things. Anyways, we'll keep building on this idea. And the goal for me, like I said with you guys, is to be teachers, for other couples specifically, and for my community, and for you guys to be able to start hosting people by you guys, and to give classes, because you guys already have your own a lot of background already yourself. We just bring it to that next level of consciousness, through the traditions, going all the way back to Africa, all the way back to Israel. And so we just continue on that front. But yeah, that's the key. But anyways, we'll be in touch. I only got a few minutes before the sun goes down.